The king ordered music to mock the servant. She played a song that exposed the truth. The feast was at its peak when the king demanded entertainment. Wine flowed like river water through the great hall of Ravenmoor Castle, and the nobility's laughter had grown cruel with drink. The massive fireplace roared with flames that cast dancing shadows across tapestries depicting the king's supposed victories, battles that history would later reveal as massacres, negotiations that were actually assassinations, treaties signed with blood instead of ink. It was then that King Roderick Blackstone, his face flushed with wine and malice, suddenly stood and slammed his golden goblet on the table. The hall fell silent instantly. When the king demanded attention, even breathing seemed too loud. His eyes, glittering with the peculiar cruelty that comes from absolute power, fixed on a young servant girl who was refilling the wine pitchers at the noble's table. "This one," he declared, pointing at her with a hand that bore rings stolen from dead men's fingers. "This is the peasant who claimed she could play music. Can you imagine? A mud-covered wretch from Millhaven who thinks herself a musician." The court roared with laughter, but it was the kind of laughter that came from fear rather than genuine mirth. Everyone knew that not laughing at the king's jokes could mean disappearing in the night. The girl stood perfectly still, the wine pitcher steady in her hands, despite the hundreds of eyes now upon her. She was perhaps 23 years old, with dark hair pulled back in the severe style required of servants, and clothes that bore the stains and patches of hard labor. But there was something in her posture, something in the way she held herself, that suggested she was not what she seemed. "Fetch your instrument, girl," the king commanded, his voice dripping with anticipation of the humiliation to come. "Play for us while we feast. Let us mock you properly with your own pathetic attempts at art. Show these other servants what happens when they forget their place and aspire to things beyond their station." But no one in that hall, not even the king himself with all his spies and informants, could have known that this moment of cruelty would become the beginning of his end. For when the servant girl began to play, the song she chose would reveal 15 years of hidden murders, expose royal bloodlines thought extinct, and bring a kingdom to its knees with nothing more than melody and truth. The music she would play had been waiting 15 years for this moment, carried in secret by a mother's dying wish, practiced in hidden places where no one could hear, perfected for the very instant when arrogance would give her the stage she needed. 3 days earlier, this same hall had witnessed the annual ritual of humiliation known as the Servants' Tribute. It was a tradition as old as the kingdom itself, though it had grown crueler under Roderick's rule. Each village that couldn't pay the ever-increasing taxes, and the king made sure most couldn't, had to send one of their young people to serve in the castle for 7 years. It was meant to be a reminder of the natural order of things, a demonstration that the poor existed only to serve the wealthy. The morning had been grey and cold, with a mist rising from the courtyard stones that made the castle seem to float in a sea of clouds. The throne room had been prepared with deliberate intimidation in mind. Guards in full armor lined the walls, their spears gleaming in the torchlight. The nobles had dressed in their finest clothes, jewels glittering at throats and wrists, a display of wealth designed to emphasize the difference between those who ruled and those who served. Among that year's offerings walked a young woman who seemed to carry herself differently from the others. While her fellow tributes stumbled and cowered, she moved through the great hall as if she were mapping it, memorizing every pillar, every banner, every face. She wore the same rough homespun as the others, but somehow made it seem like a choice rather than a circumstance. Most notably, she carried a worn leather satchel that she clutched against her side with fierce protectiveness, as if it contained something more valuable than all the jewels in the room. The king had been bored that morning, suffering from the particular ennui that comes from having absolute power with no one to truly challenge it. He had already executed 3 nobles that month for imagined conspiracies, and the court had grown tediously obedient in response. But when he saw the young woman with her straight spine and direct gaze, something sparked in his dead eyes. Here, perhaps, was entertainment. He descended from his throne with the deliberate slowness of a predator who knows its prey cannot escape. His boots, made from leather that cost more than a village's yearly taxes, clicked against the stone floor in a rhythm that had preceded many executions. The court held its breath as he circled the line of new servants, occasionally pushing one to test their balance, pulling another's hair to examine their health like a buyer at a horse market. When he reached the young woman with the satchel, he stopped. She had committed the unforgivable sin of meeting his eyes, not with defiance exactly, but with a kind of calm assessment that suggested she was studying him as much as he was studying her. The hall gasped collectively. Even the queen, who had been examining her nails with affected boredom, looked up with interest. "What is your name?" the king asked, his voice deceptively soft. Everyone knew that tone. It was the voice he used before ordering someone's tongue cut out. "Lyanna Winters, Your Majesty," she replied. Her voice was clear, carrying across the hall without shouting. "From Millhaven Village." The queen laughed at that, a sound like crystal breaking against stone. Queen Marguerite had once been beautiful, but years of complicity in her husband's cruelties had carved harsh lines around her mouth and eyes. Millhaven? That collection of mud huts by the dead forest? I'm surprised they had anyone worth sending at all. I thought they'd all died of plague or poverty by now. Or perhaps they've taken to breeding with the pigs to produce something resembling humans. The court tittered obediently, though many of them had never heard of Millhaven before. It was one of those forgotten villages on the kingdom's edge, the kind of place that appeared on tax rolls but never in stories or songs, the kind of place where people disappeared without anyone important noticing. "Tell me, girl," the king continued, now close enough that she could smell the wine already on his breath, despite the early hour. "What skills do you bring to serve your betters? Can you cook? Clean? Or are you as useless as the village that spawned you? Perhaps we should send you straight to the stables. I'm sure you're already familiar with sleeping in hay." "I am educated, Your Majesty," Lyanna replied, causing another ripple of surprise through the hall. "I read and write in 3 languages. I understand mathematics and astronomy, and I play the lute." The explosion of laughter that followed could have been heard in the deepest dungeons of the castle. Lord Gaveston, the king's chief advisor, actually had to grip the table to keep from falling over with mirth. He was a man who had risen to power by being willing to do things that turned even hardened soldiers' stomachs, and finding genuine amusement in others' humiliation was perhaps his only real pleasure. "A literate peasant who plays music," Gaveston wheezed between laughs. "Your Majesty, shall we have the pigs compose poetry next? Perhaps the chickens might perform a ballet. Oh, this is too rich, a philosopher of the farmyard." But Lyanna had not flinched, had not lowered her eyes, had not given them the satisfaction of her humiliation. If anything, she seemed to be waiting for something, as if their laughter was expected, even necessary. And that, more than anything, had marked her as dangerous in the king's eyes. "Take her below with the others," he had commanded, but then added, "No, actually, put her in the kitchens. Let her educated hands scrub pots until they bleed. Let her contemplate astronomy while cleaning chamber pots. We'll see how long her pride lasts when she's knee-deep in the nobility's filth." While, as the guards led the new servants away, an elderly woman among the castle staff had watched Lyanna with unusual intensity. She was one of those servants who had been there so long that people forgot she existed, moving through the castle like a ghost, always present but never noticed. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, followed the young woman's every movement. And when Lyanna passed close by, the old woman's breath caught as if she'd seen someone rise from the dead. The servants' quarters beneath the castle were a world apart from the grandeur above. Water seeped through ancient stones, leaving trails of slime that glowed faintly green in the torchlight. Rats were so common that the servants had named them, treating them almost as pets, since they were often the only companionship available during the long, dark nights. The air was thick with the smell of mold, unwashed bodies, and the peculiar despair that comes from hopelessness. Lyanna had been assigned a pallet in the corner where the dampness was worst, but where she could also have a small measure of privacy. As the other new servants collapsed in exhaustion and tears, many had never been away from their families before, she carefully unwrapped her satchel. The other servants, those who had been there longer, watched with the kind of bitter curiosity that comes from having nothing else to entertain them. Inside the satchel lay a loot of such extraordinary beauty that several servants gasped aloud. The wood gleamed with the deep polish of age and constant care, inlaid with mother-of-pearl that formed intricate patterns of vines and flowers. The strings, when she tested them with a gentle touch, produced notes so pure that they seemed to temporarily push back the oppressive atmosphere of the dungeon-like quarters. It was an instrument that belonged in a royal court, not in the hands of a village girl. The elderly servant woman from the throne room approached then, moving with surprising grace through the cramped space. Up close, Lyanna could see that despite the woman's ragged servant clothes and stooped posture, there was something about her that suggested she hadn't always been what she appeared. Her hands, though roughened by work, moved with the precision of someone trained in delicate tasks. Her speech, when she whispered, had the carefully modulated tones of education hidden beneath deliberately coarse words. "Hide that instrument, child," she whispered urgently, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening closely. Questions about how a peasant girl came to possess such a treasure could see you hanged for theft, or worse, they might recognize its craftsmanship. "It was my mother's," Lyanna replied, her fingers tracing the inlays with obvious love and something else, perhaps memory, perhaps promise. The only thing of value she left me when she died. The change in the old woman's expression was so sudden and profound that Lyanna instinctively reached out to steady her. The woman's face had gone white, her eyes wide with a mixture of recognition and fear. "Your mother? From Millhaven. What was her name?" Catherine Winters." Lyanna watched the old woman carefully as she spoke. "She died when I was 8, but before she died she taught me many things. Songs especially, old songs, secret songs." The old woman staggered backward as if struck. "Catherine, but that's impossible. She would have been..." She stopped herself, looking around again with paranoid fear. Several other servants were watching them now with interest. In the servants' quarters, any drama was entertainment, and secrets were currency. "You knew her," Lyanna said. "It wasn't a question. No, I thought I did, but you must be someone else's child. The Catherine I knew would never have ended up in Millhaven. She was..." The woman caught herself again, but Lyanna had heard enough. "She was lady-in-waiting to Prince Garrett," Lyanna said quietly, so quietly that only the old woman could hear. 15 years ago. The old woman's hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment Lyanna thought she might scream. But instead, she leaned in close enough that Lyanna could smell the harsh soap and old sweat that clung to all the servants. "You're playing a dangerous game, child," she whispered. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're here to do, forget it. The king has killed for far less than what you're suggesting. I've seen what happens to those who speak of the past." "And what have you seen?" Lyanna asked. "You were here, weren't you? 15 years ago." You saw what happened the night Prince Garrett died. The old woman pulled away sharply. I saw nothing. I know nothing. I'm nobody. Just old Thomasina who cleans the floors and empties the chamber pots. That's all I've ever been. But as she turned to leave, she paused and looked back. Your mother. Was she happy? In the end. She was dying, Lyanna replied. But she said she had kept her promise. She said the truth would sing again one day. Thomasina fled then, but Lyanna saw her wiping tears from her eyes as she went. That first night in the servants' quarters was when Lyanna met Willem, a boy of perhaps 16 who looked like he'd lived 3 lifetimes already. His left arm hung at an odd angle, broken and poorly set at some point, and his back bore scars visible even through his thin shirt. But his eyes were kind, and when he saw Lyanna sitting alone, he brought her a piece of bread he'd saved from his own meager ration. You shouldn't have looked the king in the eye, he said, sitting beside her with the careful movements of someone who had learned that sudden motions brought pain. He's had servants flogged for less. Last month, a girl smiled when she shouldn't have. They whipped her until her back looked like raw meat. She died 3 days later from the fever that followed. What happened to your arm? Lyanna asked, though she suspected she already knew. I dropped a plate, Willem said simply. It was my 3rd day here 2 years ago. The plate had the king's meat on it. He had the guards break my arm as a lesson to the others. They wouldn't let anyone set it properly, said it would remind me and everyone else to be more careful. And you stayed? Willem laughed bitterly. Where would I go? My village sent me here as tribute. If I run, they'll burn the village. That's the law. We're not just servants, we're hostages. A girl nearby, perhaps 14, with hollow eyes that belonged on someone much older, added her own story. My name is Sarah. My crime was being pretty. The queen noticed the king looking at me, so she had my face marked. She turned her head, revealing scars that ran from her ear to her chin. She said it was a kindness. Now I wouldn't tempt anyone into sin. More servants gathered, sharing their stories like soldiers comparing war wounds. There was Marcus, whose tongue had been cut out for singing a song the king didn't like. There was Elena, whose fingers had been broken for playing a flute. The king had declared that only nobles should make music. There was Thomas, barely 12, who cleaned the torture chambers and hadn't spoken a word since his first week. But there are stories, Willem said, lowering his voice even more, about what the king did to get the throne, about the night 15 years ago when everything changed. Tell me, Lyanna said, and something in her voice made all the servants lean in closer. They say Prince Garrett was everything his brother wasn't, Willem began. Kind, just beloved by the people. He wanted to reform the kingdom, to limit the nobility's power, to give common people rights. He even talked about ending the servants' tribute. Madness, Sarah whispered. Beautiful madness. The old king favored Garrett, Willem continued. Everyone knew he would name him heir instead of Roderick, the eldest. But then the old king died suddenly. They said it was a weak heart, but servants who cleaned his chamber said his lips were blue, his fingernails black, signs of poison. And Prince Garrett? Lyanna prompted, though she knew this story better than any of them. The night after the old king's funeral, before the succession could be announced, Prince Garrett disappeared. Roderick said his brother had tried to kill him, that he'd caught him in treason and been forced to execute him. But no one ever saw a trial, never saw a body. And everyone who served Prince Garrett, every single person in his household, vanished that same night. Servants, guards, even the stable boys, gone like they never existed. But some say, Sarah added, her scarred face animated with the telling, that a few escaped. They say a woman was seen fleeing the castle in the dead of night, carrying something precious. Some say it was gold, others say it was documents proving Roderick's crimes. But the romantic stories, they say she was carrying Prince Garrett's child. The servants all looked at Lyanna then, and she could see the question in their eyes. But before anyone could voice it, heavy footsteps echoed from the stairs. Guards were coming for the night inspection, when they would count the servants to make sure none had escaped, sometimes choosing one at random for sport. "Hide the loot," Willem whispered urgently. "If they see it, they'll take it. Or worse, they'll make you play it while they do terrible things to someone else. They like to make us complicit in each other's suffering." Lyanna quickly rewrapped the instrument and hid it beneath her pallet, covering it with the moldy straw. The guards entered, their torches making the shadows dance like demons on the walls. They counted the servants with bored efficiency, occasionally kicking someone who didn't respond quickly enough. When they left, everyone exhaled collectively. That night, when the others finally slept, Lyanna lay awake on her pallet, feeling the loot beneath her like a heartbeat. She thought of her mother, dying in that cold cottage in Millhaven, using her last strength to teach her daughter one final song. She thought of the promise she had made, the truth she carried, and the justice that had been delayed for 15 years. She must have dozed, because she woke to find Thomasina standing over her in the pre-dawn darkness. The old woman held a small candle that cast deep shadows on her face. "Come with me," Thomasina whispered, quietly. Lyanna followed her through the maze of sleeping servants, up a different staircase than the one they'd come down, through passages that seemed forgotten even by the rats. Finally, they emerged in a small room filled with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. Moonlight streamed through a narrow window, illuminating motes of dust that danced like spirits. "No one comes here," Thomasina said, setting down her candle. "This was Prince Garrett's study before... The king ordered it sealed, but he doesn't know about the servants' passage. I've been coming here for 15 years. Lyanna looked around the abandoned room. Books lined the walls, their leather bindings cracked with age and neglect. A desk stood in the corner, its surface still scattered with papers, as if the owner had just stepped out for a moment. And on the wall, partially hidden behind a torn tapestry, hung a portrait of a young man with kind eyes and golden hair, wearing the crown of a prince. "That's him," Thomasina said unnecessarily. "Prince Garrett, your father." Lyanna didn't deny it. There was no point now. "You knew. The moment I saw you, you have his eyes, his way of standing. And Catherine, I helped her escape that night. I was Lady Thomasina Fairwind then, Prince Garrett's tutor and advisor. I taught him to read, to think, to dream of a better kingdom. After he died and Catherine fled, I couldn't leave. Someone had to remember. Someone had to wait. Wait for what? For you, Thomasina said simply. Catherine sent me a message before she died. A single word. Soon. I knew you would come. I knew the truth would finally have its day. The king murdered my father, Lyanna said, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was saying. He poisoned his own father and killed his brother for the throne. Yes, Thomasina confirmed. I was there when Roderick came to Garrett that night, pretending to want reconciliation. I heard them arguing. I heard Garrett cry out, and then silence. By the time I reached the room, Roderick was standing over his brother's body, blood on his hands and a smile on his face. He saw me and would have killed me too, but I ran. I hid. And when the killing started, when he began executing everyone who had served Garrett, I disguised myself as a common servant. I've been hiding in plain sight ever since. Why didn't you ever try to reveal the truth? Thomasina laughed bitterly. With what proof? Roderick was thorough. Every document was burned, every witness killed or terrified into silence. And who would believe a servant? But you have something I don't. The lute, Lyanna said. Not just the lute, the songs. Catherine was the only one besides Garrett who knew the royal melodies, the secret songs passed down through the bloodline. Songs that can't be faked, can't be learned by simply hearing them. You need to be taught, note by note, over years, if you truly know them. I do, Lyanna confirmed. Mother taught me everything: the succession hymn, the king's lament, the song of judgment, even the melody of truth that hasn't been played in 100 years. Thomasina's eyes widened. The melody of truth? But that's just a legend. Mother said all legends have truth at their core. She said the first kings of Ravenmoor were more than just rulers. They were bards whose music carried magic. She said the throne itself was blessed with the ability to recognize the true heir. Fairy tales, Thomasina said, but her voice was uncertain. Perhaps, or perhaps the king's inability to sit comfortably on the throne for 15 years is more than just guilt. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Then Thomasina asked, "What's your plan? You can't just announce yourself. Roderick will have you killed before you can speak a word." "I need him to give me a stage," Lyanna said. "I need an audience, witnesses he can't all kill, and I need him to be so confident in his power that he doesn't see the threat until it's too late." That's a lot to need. Mother waited 15 years. She raised me in poverty and obscurity, teaching me in secret, preparing me for this moment. She died believing it would come. I won't fail her now. Thomasina studied her for a long moment. "You're very like your father. He believed in the power of truth too. It got him killed. But his death wasn't the end," Lyanna said. "It was an intermission, and now it's time for the final act." For 3 days, Lyanna worked like the other servants. She scrubbed floors until her knees bled, leaving rusty stains on the stones that looked disturbingly like old bloodstains that could never quite be cleaned. She carried water from the wells, bucket after bucket, until her shoulders screamed and her hands were raw, despite the calluses she'd developed over years of preparation. She served at table while nobles threw food at her, called her names that would make sailors blush, and competed to see who could humiliate her most creatively. But she also watched. She observed everything with the patience of a hunter who knows they have only one shot at their prey. She noticed that Captain Marcus of the Royal Guard always hesitated for just a fraction of a second before following the king's crueler orders. She saw how certain older nobles flinched whenever Prince Garrett's name was accidentally mentioned. She observed that the king never sat on his throne for more than a few minutes at a time, always finding excuses to stand or pace, as if the seat itself was uncomfortable. She watched Lord Gaveston count his gold in the treasury, gold that appeared in his coffers every month without any official record of payment. She saw Queen Marguerite's desperate attempts to appear younger, the way she punished any servant girl who might catch the king's eye, the fear behind her cruelty. She noticed Prince Aldwyn, 18 and proud, but with a strange uncertainty in his eyes whenever anyone mentioned his early childhood, which seemed oddly blank of memories. On the second day, while serving wine at a smaller dinner for the king's inner circle, she overheard a conversation that confirmed what her mother had told her. 15 years of prosperity, Lord Gaveston was saying, raising his goblet in a toast. 15 years since your majesty saved the kingdom from your brother's madness. Garrett was a fool, the king replied, his voice slightly slurred from wine. He actually believed commoners deserved rights. Can you imagine? Rights, as if sheep could govern themselves. Still, said Duke Harrington, an ancient noble who had somehow survived every political purge, it was fortunate that you discovered his treason when you did, though I never did understand how he managed to hide it so well. I knew the boy from birth, and he never seemed the type for secret plotting. The king's face darkened. Are you questioning my judgment, Harrington? Never, your majesty, the duke replied quickly, but Lyanna saw him exchange a quick glance with another elderly noble. They remembered, they knew, but fear kept them silent. The past is dead, the king declared, standing abruptly, and those who dig up the dead often join them. He looked directly at Lyanna as he said this, and she realized he had noticed her listening. You, servant, come here. Lyanna approached, keeping her eyes properly downcast now, playing the role of the broken servant. The king grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up at him. His breath reeked of wine and meat. "You're the one who claims to play music," he said, "the educated peasant." "Yes, your majesty," she replied quietly. "I should have you play for us now," he mused, his grip tightening painfully. "But no, I want a proper audience for your humiliation. Tomorrow night, the grand feast. You'll play for the entire court, and we'll see how long your pride lasts when 500 nobles are laughing at you." He released her with a push that sent her stumbling backward. The nobles laughed, but again, Lyanna noticed that not all the laughter reached their eyes. Some of them were afraid. Good. Fear could become doubt, and doubt could become belief when the truth was finally revealed. That night, in the servants' quarters, the atmosphere was different. Word had spread that Lyanna would be forced to perform at the grand feast. Some servants pitied her, knowing the humiliation that awaited. Others warned her to fail deliberately, but not too badly. The king enjoyed watching people struggle, but he grew angry if they didn't provide enough entertainment. "Just play poorly," Willem advised, his voice urgent with concern. "Not so poorly that he thinks you're defying him, but badly enough that he gets his laugh and moves on. It's a delicate balance, but it's survivable." "What if I play well?" Lyanna asked. Sarah laughed bitterly. "Then he'll find another way to humiliate you. He'll make you play while something terrible happens. He once made a minister play the harp while his own son was whipped. The man had to keep playing perfectly or the whipping would get worse. He played for 3 hours. His son died 2 days later. Or, said an older servant named Gregory, who had been there the longest, he'll decide you're too good for a servant. He'll say you must have stolen the skill somehow. He executed a servant once for painting too well, said he must have made a deal with dark forces because no commoner could have such talent naturally." But Lyanna was not deterred. That night, when the others slept, she carefully retrieved her lute and made her way to Prince Garrett's abandoned study. Thomasina was waiting for her there. "Tomorrow night," Lyanna said. "It has to be tomorrow night. The entire court will be there. Visiting nobles from other kingdoms too. I heard the servants talking. He won't be able to kill everyone who hears the truth." "He'll try," Thomasina warned. "The moment you reveal yourself, he'll order your death. Then I'll need allies." "Captain Marcus, he served my father, didn't he?" Thomasina nodded slowly. "He was young then, just a regular guard. But yes, he was loyal to Garrett. Whether that loyalty survived 15 years of serving his killer, we'll find out. Who else?" They spent hours going through the list of nobles, identifying those who might remember, who might have doubts, who might be brave enough to stand when the moment came. It was a short list. "It's not enough," Thomasina said finally. "Even if they all support you, Roderick has the guards, the army. He has 15 years of established power." "I have the truth," Lyanna replied, "and I have the songs. Mother said the melody of truth hasn't been played in 100 years because it's dangerous. It shows things as they really are. It strips away lies like fire strips away darkness. If it even works, if it's not just a story, then I'll die," Lyanna said simply. "But I'll die speaking the truth. That's more than my father got to do." The day of the grand feast dawned grey and oppressive, with clouds that promised a storm. The castle buzzed with activity as hundreds of servants prepared for the evening's entertainment. Extra tables were brought into the great hall. Torches were polished until they gleamed, and the kitchens produced smells that made even the servants' mouths water, though they knew they would get none of it. Lyanna was assigned to help prepare the hall, but she could feel eyes on her wherever she went. Word had spread among the servants about her coming performance, and they watched her with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Some tried to offer advice, others comfort, but most simply stayed away, as if her doom might be contagious. As evening approached, she was ordered to clean herself and put on the special servant's uniform reserved for those who would be prominently displayed. Still rough cloth, but clean and without patches, designed to show that even the king's servants were better than other kingdoms' nobles. It was another form of power display, another way to show wealth. She retrieved her loot and made her way to the great hall, where already hundreds of nobles were gathering. The room had been transformed into a display of obscene wealth. Gold plates and goblets covered every table, each worth more than a village could earn in a year. Tapestries depicting the king's victories, all lies Lyanna knew, covered the walls. The throne had been moved to a raised platform so everyone could see the king in his glory. But Lyanna noticed something else. The throne now had thick cushions on it, and even with those, the king seemed uncomfortable, shifting constantly. She saw him wince once when he settled back, as if the throne itself had bitten him. The feast began with the usual displays of excess. Course after course of rich food, rivers of wine, entertainment from acrobats and jesters who performed with the desperate energy of those who knew that failing to amuse could mean death. Through it all, Lyanna stood in the corner with the other servants, waiting. Finally, as the wine had done its work, and the nobles were drunk enough to be cruel without restraint, the king stood and called for silence. "My lords and ladies," he announced, his voice carrying over the din, "I have special entertainment for you tonight. You recall the servant girl who claimed to be educated, who said she could play music?" He gestured to Lyanna. "Come forward, peasant. Show us your art." Lyanna walked to the center of the hall, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. She could hear the whispers, the laughter already beginning. Someone threw a piece of bread that hit her shoulder, leaving a grease stain on her clean uniform. "Before you begin," the king said, his voice dripping with false kindness, "let me explain the rules of tonight's game. Lord Gaveston," the advisor stood, his thin face split by a cruel smile. "For every false note, the girl receives a lash. For every moment she fails to entertain us, another year added to her servitude. But if somehow she plays well enough, though we all know that's impossible, she may eat the scraps from our table instead of servants' gruel. Additionally," the queen added, her voice sharp as winter wind, "if she claims to be educated, she must prove it. She will play, and between songs, we will test her knowledge. Every wrong answer means one of her fellow servants will be punished in her place. Let's see how much her education is worth when others pay for her ignorance." Lyanna saw Willem in the crowd of servants, his face pale with fear for her. She saw Thomasina, maintaining her disguise but watching intently. She saw Captain Marcus, his hand resting on his sword hilt, his expression unreadable. "What would your majesty have me play?" Lyanna asked, her voice steady. "First," the king said, settling back in his cushioned throne and immediately shifting uncomfortably again, "play us a song about knowing one's place, about the natural order of things, kings and servants, nobles and peasants. Remind yourself and these other servants why you exist, to serve your betters. Make it a lesson in humility." Lyanna lifted her lute. The first note rang out pure and true, silencing the lingering laughter. It was a single note, but it carried such clarity, such perfection, that even the drunkest noble paused. The second note followed, then a third, and suddenly the hall was filled with a melody that seemed impossible from a single instrument. She began with a simple peasant tune, something any village musician might know. But then her fingers began to move with incredible speed and precision, transforming the simple melody into something complex, layered, beautiful. It was like watching a master painter take simple colors and create a masterpiece. The laughter died completely. Nobles leaned forward, wine goblets forgotten in their hands. Even the servants stopped their work to listen. Then Lyanna began to sing, and her voice, trained from childhood in secret, perfected through years of preparation, filled the hall with such power that the very stones seemed to resonate. In castle halls of stone and pride, where golden masks the truth do hide, a crown was stolen in the night by hands that slew their blood for might. The king's goblet slipped from his hand, wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. The Queen's fan stopped mid-flutter. Lord Gaveston half rose from his chair, his face draining of colour. The rightful prince with golden hair, who spoke of justice, truth and care, was cast away by jealous rage, his name erased from history's page. "Silence!" the king roared, standing so abruptly his throne rocked. "How dare you?" But Lyanna didn't stop. Her voice grew stronger, and something strange began to happen. The torches flickered, dimmed, then flared brighter than before. The shadows on the walls began to move independently of their sources, forming shapes that looked almost like figures. But blood remembers what men forget, and daughters carry father's debt. The lute that sings this truthful song once played in halls where it belonged. She began to walk as she played, moving toward the throne with measured steps. The melody shifted into something that made the older nobles gasp audibly, a royal fanfare, but played in a minor key, twisted into a lament. It was the private melody of House Ravenmore, played only for the immediate royal family, impossible for anyone else to know. "For I am winter's child, born of snow. My mother fled where none could go. She carried more than just her shame. She carried royal blood and name." The hall was absolutely silent except for her voice and the lute. Lyanna reached into her dress and pulled out the golden ring on its chain, holding it high so the firelight caught it, making it shine like a star. "My mother was Lady Catherine Winters," she declared, her singing voice shifting to speech, though the lute continued its accusatory melody. "Lady in waiting to Prince Garrett, the rightful heir to this throne. The prince who was murdered by his own brother 15 years ago. She fled that night carrying his child, me." The explosion of chaos that followed was immediate and deafening. Nobles shouted in shock and fear, some calling for guards, others backing toward exits. Servants pressed forward to see better. The king drew his sword, his face purple with rage. "Guards, kill this lying witch. She speaks treason. She seeks to destroy the realm with her lies." But then something extraordinary happened. Captain Marcus stepped forward, and in a voice that commanded instant attention shouted, "Hold!" He walked to the center of the hall, his armor clanking with each step, and then did something that made everyone gasp. He knelt before Lyanna. "I served Prince Garrett," he declared. "I was there the night he gave that ring to Lady Catherine. I saw him place it on her finger with my own eyes, heard him promise that their child would know their true heritage. I recognize that ring, and I recognize the truth when I hear it sung. This is the rightful heir of Ravenmore." One by one, other guards began to kneel. Not all, many remained loyal to Roderick, but enough that the king couldn't simply order an execution. The sound of armor on stone became a percussion that seemed to emphasize Lyanna's continuing melody. Then, from the servants' entrance, Thomasina emerged, but she no longer shuffled like an old servant. She walked with the bearing of nobility, pulling off her servant's cap to reveal hair that, while grey, was styled in noble fashion. "I am Lady Thomasina Fairwind," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of her true station. "I was Prince Garrett's tutor, his advisor, his friend. For 15 years, I have hidden in plain sight, waiting for this moment. I was there the night Roderick murdered his brother. I saw him standing over Garrett's body with blood on his hands. I've remained silent out of fear, but no more. This girl speaks the truth. She is Garrett's daughter." The king's position was crumbling, but he wasn't finished. Even if she is Garrett's bastard, he snarled, she has no proof beyond a ring that could be stolen, a song that could be learned by any skilled musician with enough time. Where is your proof, girl? Lyanna set down her lute for a moment, then picked it up again. You want proof? Then I'll give you proof that no one could fake, no amount of training could duplicate. She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of as many nobles as she could. I will play the succession hymn, the melody passed from parent to child in the royal family for 300 years. Each generation adds a variation, making it impossible to learn without being taught by the previous generation. The song you could never learn, uncle, because grandfather died before he could teach it to you, but he had already taught it to my father when he was young, as tradition demanded for all royal children. And my father taught it to my mother, and my mother taught it to me. She began to play a melody of such incredible complexity that several musicians in the hall gasped. It wasn't just the notes. It was the timing, the emphasis, the tiny variations that told the story of 20 generations of rulers. Each phrase built on the last, creating a musical genealogy that couldn't be faked. Old Duke Harrington, tears streaming down his ancient face, suddenly stood. By all the gods, he said, his voice shaking, I heard King Aldwin play that at Prince Garrett's naming ceremony 40 years ago. Every note, every variation, it's perfect. No one but the true bloodline could know that song. It's not possible to learn it by ear. The variations are too subtle, too specific. But the Queen, seeing her world collapsing, suddenly laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. You think you've won with your pretty songs? She stood, swaying slightly from wine and desperation. You know nothing of what we've sacrificed, what we've done to keep this kingdom strong. She turned to her husband with wild eyes. Tell her, Roderick. Tell her about our son. Tell her about Prince Aldwin, our perfect heir. From the gallery above came a strangled sound. Prince Aldwin, 18 years old and raised to be king, gripped the railing with white knuckles. The Queen's laughter grew more hysterical. He's not even ours. Our real son was born dead, strangled by his own birth cord. I couldn't give this monster another heir. My womb was damaged, the midwife said. So I stole a baby from a dying noble family, claimed him as my own. We've been living a lie for 18 years. Everything is deception. The whole kingdom is built on lies and murder and stolen children. The revelation sent another shockwave through the hall. Prince Aldwin staggered, his entire world shattering, but Lyanna looked up at him with unexpected kindness. You are not responsible for their crimes, she said gently. You were an innocent child, used by those who should have protected you. The sins of those who raised you need not define who you choose to become. The king, desperate and dangerous, suddenly grabbed a crossbow from a fallen guard. Time seemed to slow as he raised it, aimed at Lyanna's heart, and fired. But Willem, brave Willem with his broken arm and scarred back, threw himself forward. The bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell, blood pooling beneath him. Lyanna caught him, cradling his head as crimson spread across the stone floor. And in her anguish, she began to sing again. But this was different from her earlier songs. This was older, deeper, carrying something that predated the castle, predated the kingdom, reaching back to when the first kings were more than just rulers. They were bards whose music carried magic. By the old laws of king and land, by the blood upon my hand, by the truth that will not die, let the murdered testify. I call the shadows of the slain, let them speak of guilt and pain. Let the dead reveal their tale, let no liar now prevail. The temperature in the hall plummeted so suddenly that breath became visible. The torches didn't just flicker, they turned blue, casting an otherworldly light that made everyone look like ghosts themselves. And then, from the shadows, they came. They weren't quite physical, these shapes that emerged from the darkness. They were memories given form. truths that refused to stay buried. Prince Garrett appeared first, tall and noble even in death, his ghostly form bearing the wounds that killed him, knife marks in his back, the coward's killing that Roderick had delivered. Behind him came the old king, Roderick's father, his spectral face bearing the blue tinge of poison victims. Then others, so many others, servants who had been executed for knowing too much, guards who had questioned orders, nobles who had suggested that perhaps Prince Garrett should have been king. The ghosts didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Their presence was accusation enough. They stood in silent witness to 15 years of murders, 15 years of tyranny, 15 years of lies. Roderick swung his sword at them, but the blade passed harmlessly through their forms. He backed against his throne, and in desperation or madness, sat upon it, as if the seat of power could protect him. Immediately he screamed. The throne burst into flames, not ordinary fire, but something that seemed to burn from within the gold itself. Roderick leaped up, his clothes singed, his hands blistered where they had touched the armrests. The cushions he had used to make the throne comfortable were ash in seconds. The throne of Ravenmoor was blessed by the first king with ancient magic, Lyanna explained, her voice carrying over Roderick's whimpers of pain. It knows the true heir. It knows the usurper. For 15 years, you could never sit comfortably because the throne itself rejected you. The kingdom itself knew you were false. She approached the throne, still burning with that unnatural fire. But as she drew near, the flames changed. From the angry red that had burned Roderick to a warm, welcoming gold. She sat, and the fire didn't burn her. Instead, it seemed to crown her with light, making her appear as what she truly was, the rightful queen of Ravenmoor. I could rule as my ancestors did, she said, addressing the assembly from the throne that had accepted her. I could use my birthright to become another tyrant, another ruler who sees people as property. I have every right to seek revenge for my father's murder, my mother's exile, my own stolen childhood. She stood, and the flames died, leaving the throne unmarked despite the fire. But I have lived among the common people. I have suffered as they suffer. I know what it means to be seen as less than human. So I will take this throne, but I will transform what it means. She turned to Lord Gaveston, who was trying to edge toward the door. Guards, those loyal to her now, blocked his path. Lord Gaveston, she said, her voice carrying the authority of true royalty. Every coin you took as payment for your silence about my father's murder, you will return it to the villages my uncle bled dry. Every piece of gold will go to those who need it most. The records are all there, aren't they? Hidden in your private chambers, because even thieves keep books. Gaveston fell to his knees. Your Majesty, I was forced. The king made me. You had choices. You chose gold over truth. Now you'll choose poverty over the executioner's axe. To the former king and queen, she offered a different choice. Exile or trial. Leave tonight and never return, living with your shame in some foreign land, or face judgment from those you oppressed. Not nobles judging nobles, but farmers, merchants, craftsmen, the people whose lives you destroyed with your cruelty. The queen chose exile immediately, gathering her skirts and fleeing without even looking at the son she had stolen and raised. But Roderick, stripped of his power but not his rage, stood defiant. You think the nobility will accept a servant queen? He snarled. You think you can change centuries of tradition with a song and some ghost tricks? They'll rise against you. Other kingdoms will invade. You'll destroy everything. Captain Marcus stepped forward. The nobility will accept the rightful heir, and those who don't will find other kingdoms more welcoming to their antiquated views. As for other kingdoms, he looked around at the visiting nobles, many of whom were whispering among themselves. They've just witnessed the truth revealed by magic itself. Do you think they'll risk opposing someone with such power? Young Prince Aldwin descended from the gallery, his face pale but determined. Despite everything, he knelt before Lyanna. "I am not who I thought I was," he said, his voice breaking. "Everything I believed about myself was a lie, but I know who I want to become. Let me serve the true crown. Let me earn a place through merit, not false birth." Lyanna helped him to his feet. "You are as much a victim as any of us. Stay, learn. Help me build a kingdom where your worth isn't determined by whose blood you carry, but by what you choose to do with your life." The Great Hall was in chaos, but it was the chaos of transformation, not destruction. Nobles were choosing sides, guards were declaring loyalties, and through it all the servants watched in amazement as one of their own claimed the throne that had been denied her. But there was still Willem, bleeding on the floor. Lyanna knelt beside him, cradling his head. He was still breathing, but barely. "Hold on," she whispered. "You saved my life. Let me save yours." She began to sing again, a different song this time, not one her mother had taught her, but one that seemed to come from somewhere deeper, older. The ghostly figures that still lingered in the shadows drew closer, and one of them, a spectral woman in healer's robes, knelt beside Willem. She placed translucent hands over his wound, and where she touched, the bleeding slowed, then stopped. "The first queen of Ravenmoor was a healer," Thomasina whispered in awe. "The stories say she could call on the spirits of healers past to aid the living. But that was 500 years ago." The ghostly healer faded, but Willem's breathing grew stronger. He would live. As dawn broke through the Great Hall's windows, the kingdom had a new queen. But more than that, it had the promise of something different. The ghosts had faded with the night, but their message remained. Truth, once revealed, could not be hidden again. 1 year later, the transformation was remarkable. The throne room's dark tapestries had been replaced with bright banners, showing not false victories, but real achievements. The opening of schools for common children, the establishment of courts where peasants could seek justice, the creation of a council where every village had a voice. Lyanna held court not from the throne, but from a chair placed on the same level as petitioners. The throne remained, but it had become something different, a symbol that power must be earned and could be lost if abused. Willem stood beside her, fully recovered, and now captain of the People's Guard, a force that included both nobles and commoners, chosen for skill and character rather than birth. His scarred face bore new lines, but they were from smiling, not pain. Thomasina, finally able to be herself after 15 years of hiding, served as chief advisor, her wisdom helping navigate the treacherous waters of reform. Prince Aldwin, having found purpose in service rather than false birthright, had become master of agriculture, working tirelessly to repair the damage done to the kingdom's farmlands. On this day, the anniversary of the night when truth sang louder than lies, Lyanna held a festival, not in the throne room, but in the courtyard, open to all. Noble and common children played together while their parents shared food and stories. She sat on a simple platform with her mother's lute, playing for her people as she had once been forced to play for their mockery. A child in the crowd called out, "Your Majesty, play the song, the one that revealed the truth." Lyanna smiled. "That song served its purpose, little one. Tonight, I'll play you a new song, one about the future we're building together, where every voice matters, where strength comes from service, not fear." She began to play, and gradually others joined in. Servants who had learned instruments now that music wasn't forbidden to them. Nobles who had discovered humility and found it freeing rather than shameful. Children who would grow up in a world where their worth wasn't determined by their birth, but by their choices. But the story didn't end with celebration. Word of Lyanna's revolution had spread beyond Ravenmoor's borders, carried by traders and travelers who sang the songs they had learned. Other kingdoms grew nervous. King Aldous of Blackwater, a tyrant who made even Roderick look mild, declared her rule illegitimate and dangerous. "She fills the heads of peasants with impossible dreams," he wrote to his allies. If we allow this to stand, every servant in every kingdom will think themselves equal to their masters. The natural order will collapse. He assembled an army of 5,000 men and marched on Ravenmoor, expecting to crush the servant queen and restore the proper way of things. His force included knights in full armor, cavalry that could trample infantry, siege weapons that could breach any wall. Lyanna's forces were smaller, less trained, but they had something Aldous' army didn't. They believed in what they were fighting for. As the two armies faced each other on the field before Ravenmoor Castle, something unprecedented happened. The defenders of Ravenmoor began to sing. It started with one voice, then 10, then 100, then all of them. They sang the story of the servant who revealed the truth, of the king who burned on his own throne, of the kingdom reborn through melody and justice. Their voices carried across the field, reaching every ear in Aldous' army. "What are they doing?" Aldous demanded from atop his warhorse. "They're singing, my lord," his general replied, clearly unnerved. "It appears to be some sort of ballad, but it was more than that." As the soldiers listened, they began to hear their own stories in the song. Every man in that army was someone's son, someone's father. Most were commoners themselves, forced into service by lords who saw them as expendable. The song asked them a simple question. Why were they fighting to preserve a system that saw them as less than human? Lyanna rode out alone to meet Aldous, still carrying her lute. It was either supreme courage or utter madness, but she showed no fear. "King Aldous," she called out, her voice carrying across the field, "I offer you a different kind of battle. Choose your champion, your finest knight. Let them question me, challenge our ways. If they can prove that people are happier under tyranny, that fear creates a stronger kingdom than hope. I will abdicate. If I can prove that our way is better, you withdraw." Aldous laughed. "You would risk your kingdom on words? I won my kingdom with words, with truth sung aloud." "Yes, I'll risk it the same way." Aldous nodded to his champion, Sir Gareth the Iron, a man who had never lost a battle, whose strength was legendary, whose loyalty was absolute. Or so Aldous thought. The knight rode forward, his armor gleaming in the morning sun. He removed his helmet, revealing a face marked by years of battle, but also deep thought. "Your Majesty," he said, addressing Lyanna with unexpected respect, "I accept your challenge. But I have just one question, and I think you already know what it is." Lyanna nodded. "Ask it." "My sister was a servant in Castle Blackwater. She was beautiful, kind, and clever. She could sing like a bird and had taught herself to read by looking at shop signs. Last winter she died, worked to death, they said. She was given no funeral, no marker for her grave. They didn't even record her name in the registry of deaths. She was listed simply as servant girl 16 years. His voice cracked. "Under your system, would she have lived? Would she have been more than property?" Lyanna's answer was to play her lute, a gentle, sad melody that spoke of loss and remembrance. Then she sang, "Every servant has a name, every life deserves its claim, not to serve but to belong. This is why I sing this song." In Ravenmoor she would have lived, her talents recognized and given room to grow, to learn, to be more than property. She would be free. She stopped playing and spoke directly to him. "Your sister would not just have lived, she would have thrived. She would have had rights, the ability to seek other employment if mistreated, access to justice if wronged. Her ability to read would have been celebrated and expanded, not hidden. Her singing would have brought joy, not been silenced. And when her time came, many years from now, she would have been remembered, mourned, and celebrated for who she was, not what she did." Sir Gareth the Iron sat silent on his horse for a long moment. Then, in full view of both armies, he dropped his sword. The clang of metal on earth echoed across the field. He dismounted and knelt. "I have my answer," he said simply. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Other soldiers in Aldous' army began dropping their weapons. Some knelt, others simply turned and walked away. The army dissolved like morning mist before the sun, men choosing to abandon a cause they had never believed in for one that promised them dignity. "Traitors!" Aldous screamed. "Cowards! I'll have you all hanged!" But his threats fell on deaf ears. Even his own nobles were deserting him, seeing which way the wind was blowing. Some genuinely believed in the new way, others simply knew how to survive political change. But the result was the same. Aldous was left essentially alone on the field, screaming at an army that no longer existed. "It's over, Aldous," Princess Helena of Rosegate said, riding forward. She had brought a small force to observe, but now she was clearly choosing a side. "Your own people have chosen. Will you accept exile, or will you stand alone against the tide of change?" 10 years had passed since that day on the field when an army was defeated by a song. Lyanna, now in her 30s, no longer looked like the servant girl who had been forced to play for mockery. She carried herself with the natural authority of someone who had earned their power through trial and truth. But she still played her mother's lute, still sang for her people, still remembered where she came from. The kingdom had transformed beyond recognition. Where once there had been a rigid hierarchy of noble and common, now there was a fluid system based on merit and contribution. The schools that had been established taught all children together, breaking down the barriers that had once seemed natural and eternal. The courts provided justice regardless of birth, and the council gave every village a voice in governance. Lyanna sat in the garden of what had once been the private royal grounds, now a public park where anyone could walk. She was teaching a group of children, noble and common alike, to play the lute. Her own daughter, 7 years old, sat among them, learning alongside the others with no special treatment. Willem, her husband now, their love had grown slowly from mutual respect and shared purpose, watched from the shade of an apple tree. His scarred face bore new lines, but they were from laughter, not pain. He had helped build a kingdom where no child would suffer as he had suffered. Thomasina, ancient now but still sharp, approached with a letter. "News from the Continental Council," she said, her voice still strong despite her age. "They've voted unanimously. The Charter of Common Rights will be adopted across all 12 kingdoms. 12 kingdoms agreeing on anything?" Willem laughed. "That truly is magic." "No magic," Lyanna said, setting aside her lute to read the letter. "Just the power of truth spreading one song at a time. What we started here has become a chorus that spans continents." Young Prince Aldwin, he had kept the title as an ironic reminder of how meaningless titles were without merit to back them, arrived with his wife, Princess Helena. Their marriage had united 2 progressive kingdoms, but more importantly, it was a genuine love match between 2 people who shared a vision for a better world. "Sister," Aldwin said, for Lyanna had formally adopted him, giving him the family he had never truly had, "you should know. We found him. Roderick. He died this morning." The garden grew quiet. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment. "How?" Lyanna asked. "Peacefully. The farmers say he'd changed completely these last years. After his exile failed and he was captured, when you sentenced him to work the fields instead of execution, everyone expected him to die within days. But he survived. More than that, he transformed. He worked harder than any of them, never complained, helped during harvests, even delivered a baby when the midwife couldn't arrive in time. They say he died holding the hand of a child he'd helped raise, surrounded by people who had forgiven him." Lyanna stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking out over the kingdom that had once been built on blood and lies, but was now founded on truth and justice. Then perhaps he found what we all seek in the end: redemption. Even the cruelest heart can learn to beat with compassion, given time and truth. She turned back to the children who were watching with wide eyes. Remember this, all of you. Power taken by force is weak. It requires constant force to maintain. But power given freely, earned through service and truth, that power can transform not just kingdoms but souls. Her daughter raised her hand. Mother, will you teach me the song, the one that started everything? Which one, my dear, the song that exposed the truth? The song of judgment? The succession hymn? All of them. I want to know all the songs, but also I want to create new ones. Songs for the world we're building, not just the world we left behind. Liana smiled, picking up her lute again. Then let's begin. But remember, the most powerful song is the one that comes from your own truth, your own heart. The song only you can sing. As she began to play, all the children leaned in to listen. But this wasn't just a music lesson, it was the passing of a torch, the continuation of a revolution that had begun with a servant forced to play for mockery and had become a transformation that spanned continents. The garden filled with music, not just Liana's lute, but the children trying their own instruments, their voices joining in harmony and discord, creating something new. In the distance, the castle that had once been a symbol of oppression now served as a library and school, its throne room converted into a great hall where anyone could come to learn, to debate, to dream. On the walls of that hall hung a new tapestry, woven by former nobles and servants working side by side. It didn't show a queen on a throne or a king in victory. Instead, it depicted a simple scene, a young woman with a lute, surrounded by people of all stations, all singing together. Below it, embroidered in golden thread that seemed to capture the light, were the words that had become the foundation of a new age. Truth, sung loud enough, becomes revolution. As the sun set over Ravenmoor, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the music continued. It drifted over the walls, into the city where merchants and craftsmen were closing their shops, into the fields where farmers were ending their day's work, into the homes where families gathered for evening meals. Everywhere, people hummed the melodies that had freed them, sang the songs that had given them dignity, and taught their children that sometimes the most powerful weapon against tyranny isn't a sword or an army. It's a voice raised in honest song, calling others to join the chorus of change. And in the royal archives, carefully preserved in a glass case, sat a piece of parchment that historians would study for generations. It was the order, written in King Roderick's own hand 15 years ago, that had sealed his fate. Have the servant girl play her pathetic music so we might mock her properly. Below it, added by Liana herself, was a simple notation. He ordered music to mock the servant. She played a song that exposed the truth. Remember this always: those who seek to humiliate others often orchestrate their own downfall. Truth, like music, cannot be contained once it is released into the world. The story had come full circle. The servant girl, who had been ordered to play for mockery, had become a queen who played for joy. The nobles who had laughed at her were either transformed or gone. The kingdom that had been built on lies now stood on a foundation of truth. And the music played on, carried by new voices, new instruments, new dreams, but always with the same message: every person has worth, every voice deserves to be heard, and revolution begins with a single note of truth. Even now, years later, when bards tell this tale in taverns and courts across the known world, they always begin the same way. The feast was at its peak when the king demanded entertainment. And they always end with the same truth. She played a song that exposed the truth, and in doing so proved that music, honest, fearless and true, can bring down tyrants and raise up nations. The king had wanted to mock a servant. Instead, he had given her the stage she needed to change the world, and that perhaps was the greatest irony of all, that cruelty, in its arrogance, often provides the very opportunity needed for its own defeat. The music continued as it always would, as it always must, for truth, once it finds its voice, becomes immortal, and revolution, once it finds its song, becomes unstoppable.